The Business Computing Weekly podcast is made possible by GFI Software, America's leading provider of network security and email protection tools designed for the small to mid-sized business, and by frugalbrothers.com, the #1 place to purchase GFI software. Hey, welcome to Business Computing Weekly. This is episode number 395, and it is recorded on Sunday, April the 14th, 2013, the day before tax day, which is always exciting for all of us out there, right? Don't you just love filing your taxes? No?
Love it. Love it.
I'm going to bring our co-host on, Jack Mclain of Mclain's Computers. Jack, welcome to the show tonight. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you, Bruce?
I'm doing great. You know, tonight we don't have a set agenda. I just thought it would be kind of fun to have a kind of a conversation about some things that, you know, we've been wanting to talk about and just never get around to, because, when you're doing the show notes and all that, you say, okay, let's talk about this, and this, and by the time we're done, we never seem to get anything else we want to talk about in. So Jack, is there anything that you've been wanting to talk about? I know you're a little wound up over Linux and Dropbox tonight.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to talk about. The Linux and the Dropbox fiasco is one of them. Also, I had an idea I'd like to talk about some hard drive prices that I'm seeing these days. They're finally getting back to normal, and a few other things. But yeah, if you want me to start out with the what we're talking about, the Linux and the
go ahead. Go ahead. Let's talk. Because I tell you what, here's the thing. I am seeing more and more people saying, you know what, I don't like the way that the whole PC industry is going with touch this, touch that. I need a computer. I want to tweak the interface. I want to be able to run my apps and have my desktop and everything exactly the way I have it. And people are taking a good second look at Linux. And, now the gamers are saying, hey, they're bringing Steam has now been ported over to Linux, and there's some titles headed this way. Maybe Linux is maybe a real viable alternative now that it didn't used to be. So let's hear what your conundrum is with Linux right now.
Well, two things. It's funny you should say that, because two things here. One, I think Linux is a viable alternative to Windows in certain very, very specific circumstances. It has to be a very specific situation that you're in before Linux will be a viable solution for what you do. That's my opinion based on what I've seen with hundreds and hundreds of customers and people that I have personally put on Linux, on their netbooks, etc. But it's very customer specific, and in my opinion, the customers that can make do with Linux versus Windows are very few and far between. But that's just that's my personal opinion based on my experience. But for instance, and this is just one of the problems that I've seen with Linux, but I'm dealing with one lately. About the past 2 or 3 days, I've been experimenting with the Xfce or Xfce interface. And for those that don't know, with certain Linux distros, you can have the GNOME interface, you can have Xfce, you can have Cinnamon, you can have all this is different skins or different UIs that you can have. It's kind of like Android. You have stock Android, and then you have your Android with the Samsung add-ons, and then you have your no version of Android is the same. Well, it's the same way with Linux, but and it's supposed to be that way so the end user can custom tailor their version of Linux to the way they want it to operate in their experience, and in that aspect, it's a good thing.
Okay.
For instance, with the Cinnamon interface, we'll just take Linux Mint as an example. Okay, they have what's called their Cinnamon interface, and the best way I can describe it is when you click on the quote Start menu, you have a very Windows 7-ish like appearance when the Start menu comes up, and it's a very nice UI. It's very, very easy on the eyes, very nice to look at. The problem is it's also resource hungry. Okay, so the prettier it is, the more it's going to eat up your system resources, the more RAM it's going to require, the more processor it's going to require, which is fine if you're running a very modern machine, but if you're trying to repurpose an older machine with, say, 2 gigs of RAM or less and a mediocre video card, or, you're running the built-in video card, then it's not really what you want to use because it's going to be more taxing on your system. Well, they also offer what they call the mate interface, which is basically this big block of tiles that comes up on one side. And up until recently, that's been the version that I've normally installed. But they have one also that's very light on system resources. It's called Xfce or Xfce interface.
Okay.
Basically, it reminds me a whole lot of the Windows XP start menu.
Okay.
And the way it's laid out and everything. Very simple, very to the point, and it's very low on system resources. As a matter of fact, I think I'm using less than 200 megabytes, something like 185 megabytes of memory for the install, which is great. Here's the problem, and I've never had this problem in Linux, in any version of Linux before. When you go to the Software Center, try to install Dropbox, and this one here is a deal breaker, okay? Because Dropbox is one of those must-have things that get installed on any computer that I set up, be it OS 10, Linux, Windows, it doesn't matter. If I'm setting up a computer, Dropbox is one of the first things I install. Okay. Well, I go to install it in my Linux Mint with the Xfce, right?
Okay.
And I go to my Software Center and I type in Dropbox, and there it comes. It comes up, Dropbox. You click on it, click install, and it acts like it's going to install. It gets to about 95%, and then it hangs up. Okay?
Okay.
And it'll stay here for anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. Well, if you reboot your system, it'll say it's installed. But when you click on it, it's not. It asks you for your admin password, and then it just sits there and looks at you, and it does nothing. So I found out through about half a day of research on various Linux forums that what you have to do is you have to go in through the terminal. You have to rip out the old installation of Dropbox that you tried to do through the Software Center, rip that completely out, and then through the terminal, do about 5 or 6 terminal commands to get the latest version of Dropbox installed. Then you can click on the icon and go through your setup and all this. It should not be that way. And in my opinion, the end user, someone who installs Linux on their desktop machine, the end user should never have to open a terminal interface, ever. They should never have to see a terminal. I mean, when you have OS 10, unless you want to, you never have to bring the terminal up. Well, unless you just want to tweak it. I've never seen a situation where you absolutely had to bring up the terminal, or the end user had to bring up the terminal to install or remove something or whatever.
Well, that is probably one of the downfalls of Linux, is because sooner or later you're going to have to go to that terminal, and you're going to have to drop the command line, and you're going to have to, I mean, as it says today, you can do a lot without working with the command line, but I do understand what a botched install from the Software Center, like the Ubuntu Software Center, when that install botches, it's real easy to kind of hose things, get things hosed up really good.
It hosed up the whole works, and as a matter of fact, I got an error screen when I rebooted, and I had to hack my way into it. But see, I'm a motivated, what I guess what you would call a power user when it comes to Linux. I'm not an expert when it comes to Linux by any means, but I know enough to be able to get on some forums and to get on Google and be able to figure out what my problem is.
Yeah, see, the average consumer is not going to put up with that.
The average end user is not going to put up with that,
right.
And until it's to the point where you can go into the Ubuntu Software Center or whatever, the packet manager or whatever you're in, and you can click one button and install or remove anything without botching the system, and you never have to open that terminal. Until you get to that point in Linux, Linux is never going to be competition for Windows. Period. That's just how it is.
Obviously, I think of all the distros out there, I mean, you don't have to be the swiftest guy on the block to know that is Ubuntu. Is kind of, when people think now of Linux, I think more times than not think of Ubuntu.
Well, I'm a big fan of Linux Mint.
Yeah, I do too. I like Mint as well, but don't you think that the majority of folks out there, when they think Linux now, they think of Ubuntu?
I think so. That's mainly perpetuated on the forums and by Ubuntu itself. I think, and you know, Linux is, or not Linux, but Linux Mint is based on Ubuntu.
Right.
The only, yeah, but I mean, the main
Debian
difference,
distro, right?
right, and the main difference is honestly, with Ubuntu, you have to deal with what they call their Unity interface, which I think is absolutely horrible. Unity is to Linux what Windows 8 Metro UI is to Windows, in my opinion.
Is that your take on it? Because I guess my take on it is their attempt to make it more Mac-like.
I absolutely hate it. I absolutely despise it.
I mean, do you kind of see the analogy there? A lot of what they're doing kind of makes it look more OS 10-ish.
Right, and I see the analogy there. I think they've done a really poor job with it. Just like with Windows. I think Windows did a very poor job with their Metro UI, or whatever they're calling it, modern user interface. I think they did a very poor job with it, and I think Unity is a very poor, very poor, very unintuitive user interface. I like the old GNOME style interface. Okay,
all right.
The original drop down menu. I'm old school. I like that. That's why I like Xfce. The Mate interface with or Cinnamon interface with Linux Mint. Both of those are good. But I don't like Unity. It's just it's too much. It's too cluttered, and it doesn't make sense to me, and it's not near as intuitive to me as the other interfaces are. And like you said, it could be their attempt at copying OS 10, but I think it's a very poor.
Yeah, I think it's their attempt to make it more Mac-like, and I think, believe me, I think that they've made some real strides with you. It's gotten a whole lot better. Mm-hmm. But when an install gets botched up, and I've had that happen in virtual machines, ultimately, at the end of the day, the fix was to basically roll back the virtual machine, rewind it, and before the point of the install. But if you got somebody who's actually, either a college student or whatever, and this is their main system, and you get and that goes sideways on them when you start mentioning, okay, go ahead and fire up terminal, and I want you to type in sudo blah 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 blah. They're going to be like, what is this all about? But I think that's going to change. I think that's going to continue.
It's going to get better.
The Linux purists out there, and they're a wonderful group of folks. Right. They kind of grit their teeth at all this stuff that's been happening to make Linux more user-friendly because they feel that they're giving up power and control over the OS, and it's being dumbed down so that the average user can use it. I think that's a feeling that's kind of out there. But talking about Windows 8, last week, I don't know if you've seen this Gartner report that come out and said that we're predicting Windows the PCs are going to continue. They had the worst quarter ever in losses. It was quarter over quarter. Sales of Windows PCs was down like 14%, 13.5%, something like that. It was twice as much as what was predicted. Right. And Gartner's basically saying, hey, Microsoft, you're going to be irrelevant because of this. And, people are now able to do a lot more with in fact, they're going to sell a record like 2.5 billion mobile type units out there. There's tablets, phones, etc. And the PC is going to go away. And yet I keep thinking, like here at work, I can't fathom trying to do my job on a tablet or phone. I just can't. And I'll give you an example. So, I make my money by doing sales, and particularly I sell software. And one of the things that I do a lot of is I have to generate quotes. Lots and lots of quotes. I live in the world of quoting. And in order to do a quote, I have to have multiple windows open. I have to have a browser open. I have to have my accounting software open. And now I'm looking at a package called QuoteWorks. And this thing is... in theory, going to be a great application for me, but I'm trying to get my mind around this application called QuoteWorks. And then I've got a spreadsheet open to boot, an Excel spreadsheet. So I got all this stuff going on. That's why I have to have at least 2 monitors to do my work. 3 would be ideal, but I just don't have room for 3. How am I going to do that with tablets and a phone? I just can't. And I don't want the PC to become irrelevant. And I understand that they're not saying they're going to go away totally, but until the developers, in my opinion, get serious about enterprise level applications on mobile platforms, because right now they're a poor cousin to the desktop. They really are. Right? Until that happens. So how, if I was looking at MSNBC today, there was an article on there. And the article, who's this written by? Avram Pilch, I believe. And the name of the article is 7 Ways to Bring Back the PC. This is Avram's idea. And just kind of go through them really, really quick. Number 1, the very first thing is fix or dump Windows 8. Fix or dump it. And if you look at this Gartner report, Jack, it all boils down to this: that people are looking at Windows 8 and they're going, "No way, I don't want it. I don't like it." And they buy, as you said, I think it was you that told me that you knew some folks that worked at like Best Buy or Staples or something like that, and people were buying new Windows 8 machines and then turn around and bring them back.
70%.
70% return rate on these things.
Up to 70% return rate, and I'll agree with you what you're saying. The one biggest factor in that 13% drop in PC sales.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 biggest factors were 1, Windows 8. In my opinion, that was the biggest factor, and 2, this right here.
Tablets.
That's the 2 biggest factors. And here's the thing. I don't see the PC getting phased out anytime soon, okay?
No.
But the problem is, for every one user like you or like myself who need a desktop machine or a very capable laptop, for every one user like you and I, you have 10 users who they sit in front of this powerful desktop machine for 8 hours a day, and they only have one window open, and they stay inside their one little box, and that's all they do all day inside one application. And for those people, they could get by easily with an iPad or an iPad type device. But for every one user, how many times have you gone to an office and they have 10, 15, 20 people doing their job, and they're sitting here with these Dell systems that are fairly powerful systems,
mm-hmm.
and they have these 20-inch monitors, and they have one application open, and that's all they do is something inside one or at most 2 applications. They might send an email or a few emails during the course of a day, but mostly they're sitting inside 1 or 2 applications and they're sending out emails. Those things could easily be accomplished on an iPad. So don't get me wrong. I think I'm agreeing with you very much so that I cannot get by. I cannot do my job with an iPad.
No.
I can't do it. There's no way. And there's no way you could do your job with an iPad.
Nope.
But for every one of us, there's probably 10 of those types of people out there.
Well, yeah, but Jack, consider this. Look at all the innovation that's been going on with phones and tablets over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's look at the amount of innovation that's been happening in the world of, say, laptops.
What innovation?
Exactly. They've not. You still get the same really crap. I mean, you look at that $500-$600 price range for. I know they want everybody to run out by $1,200-$1,500 Ultrabooks.
Right.
But the reality is, most people spend around that $500 to $600 range on a laptop.
Right, and they have not changed the price.
They still have the same. How come you can get like a 25 by 60 or a 2560 by 1600 resolution on, say, a Nexus 10,
mm-hmm.
okay, or a 1920 by 1080 on a phone, but you're still only getting 1366 by 768 on those $500, $600 laptops?
I've seen some of them. Actually, a lot of the ones I've been working on these days have been 1024 by 768.
Okay. Okay, fine. 1360, but look at that. I mean, where's the innovation there? Let's talk about battery life. They're going backwards on battery life. At one time, the Ultrabooks were getting around 6 hours or so time. Now they're going backwards on that as well. So they're battery guzzlers. They're not. There's been no real innovation in getting better battery life. There's been no innovation in getting better resolution screens at an affordable price on these things.
Well, let me ask you though: is that the manufacturer's fault? Is that fault? Is that the customer's fault for not pushing?
Oh, it's clearly the manufacturer's fault. Come on, Jack. Come on. If the tablet people can do them and sell a tablet for with a high resolution screen for $400.
No, I agree with what you're saying. What I'm asking you is, if the customers demanded these things, the manufacturers would have to do it. The customers are not.
Well, they are. And you know what they're doing? They're going to say, "Hey, I'm going to get a tablet instead."
Right. But what I think the customers are demanding, they're demanding a much better laptop, but they want to keep that $300 to $500 price point. And I think the manufacturers are saying, we're not going to do that because we're going to cut our profit margins in half if we do that.
Well, what profit margins? They're losing an entire market.
Well, they are. They're doing that because they're being stubborn and they're not innovating. And that, they're in this rut. They're comfortable. They're in their nice little comfort zone because for the past 6 or 7 years, people have been able to go to Walmart and buy these $300 to $500 throwaway PCs, and they didn't have any competition. And now people can go to the Mac refurb store. They pick this up for $319, and they can do about 95% of what they can do on that $300, $400 laptop. So that now they have some competition, and that's why you're seeing the PC market plummet.
Well, okay. And I think the author of this article brings up another good point. Okay, you take the Samsungs of the world, the HTCs. They, when you buy a new phone or a new tablet with these guys, they have some really great software that enhances the value of that machine in your purchase price. When you buy a $500 laptop, you know what you get? You get the same old crapware and trialware that you've always gotten.
You get the trial version of Norton, McAfee, and about 600 other programs that you're never going to use.
Exactly. You don't get this stuff. So you don't get any really great software to make it a useful machine right out of the box. They could partner with Microsoft to give you a version of Office that's not just trialware, but the actual deal.
It's
they could preload some really good software to give.
They could, and it's gotten so bad. I don't know if I told you about this, but last week I got a customer bring in a laptop, and this lady, every computer she has purchased over the past 4 or 5 years, she's purchased a few. She always brings it to me and tells me to clean it up before she ever uses it. She brings it to me in the box, and she says, "Set it up for me and clean it up for me." Because she knows that it's going to come with all this trialware and crapware and bloatware installed on it. But it has gotten to the point now where it is so bad and there are so many crapware programs installed on these machines, it almost makes more sense just to wipe it out and reinstall Windows.
Yeah.
Because it'll take me a good 2 to 3 hours sitting here with PC decrapifier and a Revo uninstaller and registry cleaners to pull out all of this garbage that's installed. And the thing about it is, at the end of it, it may be that some of this stuff was so embedded into the operating system that it actually botches up the operating system once it's ripped out. So it's almost more practical just to go ahead and just say, okay, wipe it and start from scratch with a bare, clean installation of Windows 7 Home Premium or whatever it is.
Well, another thing is that if you take a Core i5, let's say you're I think for around $500-$600, what are you going to get? You're going to get a Core i5 processor, 500 gigs of RAM. You're going to get that.
You get maybe at the Walmart that I'm down the road. You're going to get a Core i3.
Well, I see Core i5s like Tiger Direct and all that for around $500-$600.
I see a few, but not very often.
But here's the thing: the software, most of the software that's out there, don't even take advantage of the processing power that these things have.
No, and here's the thing: if you buy one of these off the shelf, you go to your local Walmart and you stay into that $300 to $500 range on your notebook. Here's the thing that everybody needs to know: They're saving that money somewhere, okay? What is the difference between, if you compare spec for spec, what is the difference between a $400 notebook and a $1,000 notebook?
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you what they do. Somewhere along the line, they skimped on something, and usually where they get you is on the processor. Usually where they get you is on the CPU. When you get down into the $300 and $400 range on these notebooks, they're running some dual-core, extremely low-end AMD processor on these.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're horrible. I mean, they're processors that mobile phones would turn their nose up at. And they're installing these to save money. Because if they put Core i3 and they put Core i5 in here, they're going to have to pay for it. And they're going to have to, in turn that cost over to you. That's how they're saving their money. So you really need to look at the spec. You need, the specs on your laptop before you buy it. If you compare spec for spec, you're going to see where their hard drives. If you go with a good manufacturer and you spend $1,000 more on a laptop, chances are you're going to get a decent hard drive. If you get one of these bargain basement $300 or $400 notebooks, what you're getting maybe is something like a Hitachi, what we call in the business a Death Star. Hitachi Death Star is probably going to die on you after about a month or two.
So here's a question the author of this article asks. He says, if $500 buys you a 15-inch notebook with a Core i5 CPU, 500 gig hard drive, then it should cost $600 to $700 to get a 14-incher with an SSD. But if you really want a light laptop or one with an SSD built in, you're going to be paying through the nose and more likely giving up and sticking with your older computer for another year because the price differential. In other words, he's saying they need to lower the prices, especially if you want to get things like an SSD or whatever. It should be made more affordable. Why is it that you have to jump from that $500 to $600 range to that $1,000, $1,200 bucket in order to get a laptop shipped to you with an SSD? Let's say why that? All that extra pricing built in. I mean, I think that's a fair question.
The thing is, and everybody have their own opinion. I'm not sure, but I think at the end of the day, I think that the manufacturers are thinking if you can afford it, they're going to charge it. And I mean, that's the bottom line. If you can afford it, they're going to charge it. And it's not so much a matter of what they have in it, but it's a different customer that they're trying to appeal to. And that's my opinion. Now, when you step up from, your $600 to $800 notebooks into your $1,500, $1,600 or $2,000 notebooks, there is usually a substantial increase in quality. Okay, there's usually.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Usually a big jump in quality, and you won't see that below the $1,000 range in notebooks, in my opinion. Not from what I've seen.
That's because this is another point the author brought up. Says focus on build quality. Now, if you want to save the PC business, take a look who is still doing well during this downturn in PC sales. Lenovo, still doing really, really well. Let's see, anybody else?
I think Apple's doing pretty
Asus. Good. Okay, Asus is doing.
Asus is doing good.
Asus is doing good. And the reason being, now, if you look at Lenovo, I think nobody can question the build quality of a Lenovo laptop. Right. Those ThinkPads and their, those are things that are built like a tank.
It's funny you should say that. I have when it was made by IBM, I have an old IBM ThinkPad. It's in here under the bed.
Is it the T41?
No, it was before that. This thing is probably, this thing. It's probably 15, 16 years old.
Oh, wow. Well, I know I have the T41s, and I loved them.
Now, this says Windows 98 on it.
Okay.
And it still works perfectly.
I think it was a T41, maybe a T43, but I'm thinking T41.
Right. This has a Pentium 3 processor in it. Okay. It has 128 megabytes of RAM. It has a 4 gig hard drive, and it still works absolutely perfectly. Now, this machine is absolutely ancient. I mean, it was new in 1999, okay? So, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, the quality on it. It's all metal. It feels solid in the hand. And it still works. After all these years, it still works. How many of these computers that you're going to Walmart or Best Buy and you're buying for $600, $700, $800, how many of these computers are going to be working in 4 years?
Well, they're not. Now, you know it and I know it. And that's the thing. As long as manufacturers keep chugging out these $500-$600 blocks of cheap plastic with flexible keyboards in them and cheap, displays, they're just going to, you're right. People are going to say, you know what, I want something for my $500. I can get a little bit more quality by getting an iPad. I can get something more quality in a tablet or,
you're taking a big step up in quality for the same price.
Absolutely.
There's no comparison. When you compare an iPad, there's absolutely no comparison in quality from this to any machine you're going to see at Walmart. No comparison. I don't care what the price is. You're not going to compare this quality to any machine you're going to find at Walmart. I do what they love me for this at Walmart, by the way, but I do what's called the flex test.
Okay. I think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
I can pick up any notebook on the shelf at Walmart, or for that matter, Best Buy, unless it's a Mac or a Lenovo ThinkPad. I can pick up any laptop, if it's an Acer, a Toshiba, a Dell, or whatever, and I can grab both ends and I can bend it, just like this, and you can hear everything in it popping and creaking and bending and flexing. And if I wanted to, I could probably just do that and snap it in half. That should never be the case. They should never be allowed to turn out something that cheaply made.
But that's the thing. They're trying to make a profit. And this, I think they're kind of in this race to the bottom, in the hardware business. And you know what? And obviously I talk about business technology, but businesses can't afford to be buying new computers every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
Most of us don't have that kind of deep a pocket. We try to make them last, about 5 years.
Right, we have to, and that's the thing, too. And if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to buy something that has some quality to it.
You've got to, right. I've bought, look, I'm no different than anybody else. When I was first getting started out, Jack, I bought cheap computers. I bought a cheap, my first one for my business was I bought an HP Pavilion desktop. That thing literally fell apart all around me. The video card died within a few months. Hard drive failure. The plastic on and off button popped off in my hand one day.
We've all did that.
I did that. Been there, done that, and I swear to God, I'd never do it again.
My first main desktop computer for my business. You're gonna love this. It was an E-machine.
Oh, well, I'm talking. Yeah, I've had E-machines. My prior businesses, I was the king of going out looking at the new E-machines all the time.
Yep.
But they did offer some real value for the money back in the day. If you didn't go the custom PC route, what was it, the Pentium 4? Mm-hmm. They were like one of the first ones to make a machine with an affordable Pentium 4 chip in it for around $500 or $600, and that was a big deal.
My E-machine, I still remember the specs. It had a 2600 AMD Athlon processor in it, around 2 gigahertz. It had 512 megs of RAM, and it had a 60 gig hard drive. And I absolutely love that machine. And the thing is, as long as it stayed in one place, it was fine. But if you ever tried to pick it up and move it anywhere, something's going to fall off of it. You know what I mean?
Or it wouldn't boot. Did you ever have that happen? Seriously, all you did was just move a PC and it wouldn't boot.
No, here's speaking of that very E-machine, I kept that machine for I'd say about 3.5 to 4 years. Okay, and I upgraded the memory to 768, and I put another hard drive in it, so I had 2 60 gig hard drives running in it. It was a great system, right? So, and it had a 15-inch flat panel, and I got in touch with the guy that I worked out with at the gym, and he said, listen, I need a computer, but I don't want to go over X amount. I'm looking for something used that would just get me on the internet, etc. And I said, well, I'm getting ready to buy a laptop. I can part with this system. And I ended up selling him this Acer, I think, for like $100 to $150. Here's the thing. I reinstalled Windows, I reinstalled on it. And for some reason, right before I was going to box it up and sell it to him, there was one more thing that I remembered that I needed to do. So I plugged it in, and when I plugged it in, the power supply caught on fire. And I kicked. I just reflexively pushed it away from me because it's shooting blue flames out about 10 inches in the back. And I pushed it away from me, and it set the carpet on fire, and it was absolutely horrible. And I couldn't figure out what had happened, but basically all I did was move it from one room to another and then plug it back in. And when I did that, the power supply just melted, and I had to pull it out. At the time, I had to spend about $50 on a brand new power supply, and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess.
Where went your profit? Or, I mean,
pretty profit just a little bit, So.
Yeah. Long story short, my father used to be into antique cars. Mm-hmm. And, he was a working stiff, didn't make a lot of money working at a factory, but he bought a 1930 Model A pickup truck. And I spent my teenage years, like 12 to 16, going out with Dad all the time looking for parts for this Model A. Because he really drugged this thing home in boxes and parts. And when we put this pickup truck back together, and we went to swap meets, and we went and found parts here and there, and it took us like 4 years, and he finally got it all put back together. We had it running. He found a rebuilt engine for it, and it was a primer yellow color. It was just god ugly thing, but it was. My dad loved it. Well, long story short, the factory worked out, went on a long strike, and when that happened, money got really, really tough. Well, a furniture salesman in town, I had a furniture store, wanted to buy Dad's truck and use it for promotion. He was going to have it painted and then use it to promote his furniture store. I guess that was the story. The day before the guy came down with the money to buy Dad's truck, it caught fire. They used to have these things in the front cab. That's where the gas tank was, mm-hmm. on the Model A. And it had a metal line coming out of the gas tank into a glass bowl. They called it a settling bowl. And then from there, a fuel line went on into the carburetor. Mm-hmm. That line between the settling bowl and the carburetor developed a leak. And when Dad hit the spark, the gas hit, burned it up. Fortunately, the thing didn't blow up or totally burn out. We got the fire put out pretty quick before it, ignited the gas tank. Right. But Dad was heartbroken. Dad was heartbroken. And that story of your power supply kind of reminded me, because, we really needed the money too. The family really needed the money. We ended up selling the truck, but yeah, that's pretty horrible.
I've never seen a power supply do that since or before that. It was a one-time thing, and literally it shot blue flames about 10 inches to a foot out of the back of it. It looked like a blowtorch. And for no apparent reason, I don't know why it did it. I've never had it happen since. Now, I've had some very interesting things happen when you accidentally put RAM in backward in a motherboard. But that's
really, it let you do it?
It let me do it. This was an older machine, and I actually installed the RAM in the wrong way. And because it was not on this particular machine, this was like I believe it was a gateway machine, and this was maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And the RAM was not clearly pinned where you could, where it would only go in one way. It would actually let you push it in backward. And I was in a hurry. I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing. I put it in backward. I fired the machine up, and of course, I always left the side plate off when I would fire it up, to make sure the fans were all turning the way they're supposed to, whatever. And I fired it up, and when I did, I heard this high-pitched whistling sound, and I could smell something burning. And I looked, and it had turned this stick of RAM into what looked like gelatin almost. And I pulled the plug on it really quick. You're going to love this part. Common sense would say you let this thing cool off for a little while before you pull it out of the slot, right? Mm-hmm. Well, common sense wasn't on my side that day. So I grabbed this stick of RAM, ripped it out of the slot, and when I did, it left. I had the pins on the stick of RAM. Uh-huh. I had burned into my thumb and index finger for about 6 months after that. I had a nice little scar that was in the perfect shape of those pins, where it had burned into my skin. Wow. That stick of RAM was about 1,000 degrees when I pulled it out of there. So note to self, let that thing cool off a little bit before you go pulling RAM out of it.
Oh, I reckon. Well, fortunately, that doesn't really happen today, thankfully. But I tell you what, experience I did have one time. Cindy had a Mac Mini, and it came with 2 gigs of memory, and so we were going to do an upgrade to 8 gigs. So and this is before this older model was the kind designed for you not to open. They didn't want Apple. You had to get a putty knife and pry the bottom off, and that I got done, and I got it all opened up, and got to the RAM, and I got the old sticks out, and I put the new ones in, and it wouldn't boot. It wouldn't boot. And I tried changing it around and stuff, and same thing, wouldn't boot. And finally, I got it to boot because you had 2 slots. And I don't know what kind what the mechanism is the kind where the memory slots kind of lay down, and you flip these little pins and they pop up.
Just like on a laptop.
Yeah, like a laptop. But anyhow, apparently, the bottom one, when I put the RAM in, a pin something got bent on the motherboard side. That should never have happened. Never, ever have happened. And unfortunately, it was out of warranty from Apple, and they're going, well, we don't know what to tell you, but I mean, no, that shouldn't have happened, but you're not supposed to be opening up your Mac. It's not factory serviceable.
Right.
I mean, it's not user serviceable. So enter at your own risk.
Yep.
It was the weirdest thing. I've installed memory for years and years and years. I've never had that happen. But they're saying, well, you must have put it in just wrong, just a little bit wrong, and it bent something on there, and therefore it wouldn't allow it boot. That's crazy.
Speaking of upgrading the RAM, I was looking on Apple's website yesterday, and I had an article in my newsfeed. I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but I have Vienna up all the time, so I can see my RSS feeds coming in. And I got a little article in there that said, this might have been day before yesterday, but at any rate, it said the new iMacs were now available in the Apple Refurb store. And you know me, I never buy new. I always buy from the Apple Refurb store.
Okay.
And so I went there, and they do have several 27-inch of the newer iMacs, 27-inch. But I was looking. I don't know if you know this or not, but did you know the RAM on the 20-inch or the 21-inch models are not user upgradable?
I did know that.
You can't upgrade it at all. There's no
and
place.
And they're not user upgradable on the MacBook Pros.
And I knew about the MacBook Pro, but I wasn't sure. I had heard that they were not user upgradable on the smaller iMacs. But I went there and I looked, and sure enough, they are not. Whatever you get from the factory, that's what you're stuck with on those devices.
So you better be really, really careful what you order up front, because you're going to have to live with that.
I wouldn't buy it. I would not. That right there would keep me from buying, because I actually had thought, my wife and I had discussed getting rid of this. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but this custom desktop system over here. We had actually thought about getting rid of this and replacing it with one of the smaller iMacs. And but after seeing that, I would not buy one. I would rather buy one of the lower end, the Core i5 model 27-inch iMacs, and be able to upgrade the RAM when I get ready to, than I had buy one of those. That makes no sense to me. On a desktop machine that's that powerful, there is no excuse for not making.
Why don't you just quick question? Why don't you just look at a new Mac Mini instead? I think you're going to get more value for the money. Then if you choose between that and the 21-inch, why not go with the Mac Mini? You can get a quad-core i7. And
we started thinking about that. I was talking to her about that the other day, and we got off on something else. That's why our conversations usually go. We get from one thing to another. But, yeah, we had started talking about that, and we haven't went back to it yet. But I'm going to have to do a little research and see, look at the specs that I can get. Of course, you'd be looking at another monitor, because this monitor's seen its better days, so I'd have to get another monitor and everything. But yeah, we're looking into it though. And you can get a really nice Cat Leap display for around $350, and that's the 27-inch, which is a stunning display. And then you can get a refurb Mac Mini with the i7. For what, $799, I think? Now, how much would it? How much are they running without me having to bring up
Mm-hmm.
The Mac store here? How much do the i5s run?
What's the base price? Oh man, I don't know. I right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you,
Hold on
Jack.
just a second. I'll just go ahead and bring it up and look. Let's go to the Apple store here, and let's go to the refurb. Let's see, refurbished Mac,
Yeah.
and let's go to Mac Mini, and we have a. All we have are i7s. They don't have an i5 in the works here.
But are those quads? Or
Yeah,
are those dual cores?
no, these are quad core. We have a refurbished Mac Mini with let's see.
Oh, these are okay. Yeah, but see, these are running the OS 10 server.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so that you wouldn't really want. These were the older machines released in 2011.
Right. No, that's not what I'm looking for.
No, that's not what you're going to want. So they don't have any of the builds that were released last year.
Yeah.
The 2012s. They don't have. Apparently, they don't have any of those.
No, they sure don't.
Well, here's one, but it's also got the server on it. And because I think what you would want, what do they call that? Fusion drive? Is that the Fusion?
Okay.
So I guess if you go back to the store and you look at the Mac Mini, and I mean, okay, $799 with a 1 terabyte hard drive, and then select that. I wouldn't get one of these things unless it had a Fusion drive. You can bump it to 8 gigs for $100. I might consider that, even though I can still probably get it cheaper. Here's your choice on if you $250 to add the Fusion drive, which is
these particular models. They are very user serviceable.
Yeah.
I've actually had to go into one of these at one point, and yeah, it's amazing how far they come from having to dig into your computer with a putty knife. And literally,
people got tired of that.
Oh yeah, and literally nowadays there's a plate on the bottom about 7 or 8 inches circle, and you just turn it, and it pops right off, and you can change it out.
You get right to it. You can get right to your memory on that.
That may be what I actually go to.
Well, it's certainly one. I mean, the Mac Mini might, depending what you're going to do with it. Okay, here's the thing: the iMac is a lovely machine.
Oh, it is.
It really is. But here's my big problem with the iMac. At the end of the day, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, and if I lose, a CPU or what have you, guess what? That beautiful display that I'm paying good money for is no longer usable to me.
Right. And
that is when the showstopper for me with the iMac. And I mean, I've thought about, because my Mac Pro, I would kind of like to get a newer computer here down the road. And I keep thinking, boy, do I choose a laptop, an iMac, Mac Mini? Because I have a feeling if and when they introduce a new Mac Pro, it's going to be out of my budget.
Right. Well, it will be for a while.
It's definitely going to be out of my budget. So I got to look at, getting as much machine for the money as I can, but there's so many different ways to go. Oh, goodness, look at the time.
Okay. Well, I won't keep you.
Oh, well, no, I need to take care of some stuff, but I just thought it'd be fun to sit here and just, talk a little bit about different things. Is there anything else that you've wanted to talk about we haven't given you an opportunity to, Jack?
I have a dozen things I could sit here and rant about for the next hour and a half. But I mean, you have things you need to do, places you need to be. So I'll let you get on with what you have to do. But I really enjoyed. I think we need to have one of these about once a month where we just sit around and we talk about whatever we want to talk about.
I think that's a good idea. We'll just call it like a no agenda show, something like that. I like it too. We'll do that. Okay. On that note, everybody, we're going to wrap up. I guess the only business thing I really talked about today was QuoteWorks, and I'm going to be working on doing a review of QuoteWorks and getting that up on YouTube in the near future, because quoting is a big deal for a lot of businesses. With that in mind, Jack, have a great week ahead of you. Make some money Will you?
I plan on it.
Always warms my heart when I hear you're saving money and making money. Isn't that terrible?
The only way to do it.
The only way to do it. Okay, everybody. We'll talk to you later. Take care.